So the comment about never give me anything that starts with an E, like e-printing or anything. Um, the way I used to do things when digitization started, or computers, they weren't computers, they were these massive monsters that were on desks, and you
Mhm.
needed to know the language. And I had a secretary or a receptionist who knew the language. She was very, very good. She was an absolute hoot. But what I would do is 8.5 by 14 yellow lined paper. I would write out everything. Then I would hand it to her. She would type it or put it on a disc that was the size of a small plate.
Yep.
And of course, I did not have one of these. We only had one in the entire office, because the board of directors of this organization said, we only need one. That's it. Everybody, they don't need this. Okay, fine. So talk about all of us being dinosaurs. And so at the time, I was writing a massive report for an external committee that became the basis of the Logistics Institute. It's called Bridging the Gap, is the final report. And it's about 150, almost 190 pages. So this is not small. So think about writing every single page,
Mhm.
in longhand, on 8.5 by 14 paper, handing it to somebody, and then go back and start revising.
Yep.
Oh, there were times when she just wanted to kill me. She just looked at me going, really? You can't make just the final version, because you needed to know the cobalt or whatever the language was, and it was not easy to make a change, right?
No.
Everything had levels of complexity to it, and at that time I would call it complications. And here I am doing my usual, I'm going to hand it out, handwriting, and just, it's easy. Just you go and type it in. It's just typing, isn't it? No. So we live in a totally different world now, where we could I have really good friends, and Dave sometimes sends me emails where he talks into his phone, and it creates in an AI way the email.
Yep.
Of course, he's from down east, so he's got a bit of an accent. Of course, Alexis doesn't understand accents, or AI doesn't understand the voice. And so every so often I get an email, and he wouldn't reread it. He thought, well, once I said it, it's done.
Be consent.
It's done. Hit send and it's gone. And I would look at it and I say, okay, Dave, this is really interesting. Not sure what you meant by this sentence, not sure what you meant by that sentence, so on and so forth. And of course, now we are in the world of AI, where when we type things and so on and so forth, in emails and so on and so forth, it auto corrects. And now I absolutely must reread all of my messages before I send them, because I look at it and I say, what is that word they just used? It really is insane. I just don't get it.
And there's always been a difference between our spoken word and our written word. And if you think
Mm-hmm.
about how complex it was to publish a book in the 1800s,
Right.
to the typesetting and everything that was involved to just produce
Exactly.
one copy
Right.
of one book, and then
Right.
the theory behind binding books. Obviously, we don't have that issue anymore. Not a bad problem to have, if you ask me, but we don't use the same language.
No.
So my problem is when I type a blog every day. I publish a blog 6 days a week on different subjects. Today, I was typing one on preparedness and war and the relationship between global conflict and the individual.
Mm-hmm.
I don't necessarily speak with all the prepositions.
Ah.
So when I start typing, it's sometimes the brain types what the brain is thinking, not what correct, grammatically accurate English would look like.
Right.
And so I've sent out a corporate newsletter before without rereading it and then smacking my head when I get my copy in my inbox. It's like sending the announcement without the attachments that we've all done
Oh,
sometime in
oh,
our life, right?
exactly.
And we've had to
Exactly.
eat that crow
Exactly.
and
Oh,
whatever
yeah.
it may be. But so I have to now, and I've matured, let's call it that, to the point where I deliberately take the time to read it
Yeah.
carefully
Yeah. Yeah. Yeah.
because nurture and nature look a lot the same, but they don't have the same connotation,
No, no,
right?
no,
So,
I agree.
it's yeah.
You know,
So,
that alone, just our little stories right now
yeah.
are, I think that's worthy of an analysis of cultural change. There are indications, and everybody tells us that the use of technology, information technology, is going to reduce our work. And I think it does, very much so. I mean, to sit at a typewriter and then redo it and then rip a page out in order to redo a page. I mean, I'm sorry, that's fiction. It doesn't happen that way. You do have to rip it out and you do have to start all over again. And I don't care what your IBM Selectric, has as that extra, get rid of the two or three, mistakes that you make. It doesn't work that way. It's a start all over again kind of thing. So there's an extra step right there. But using a computer, using a computer to write things, I find using a computer incredibly helpful, very dynamic, and I become very, very, very creative. Less academic in my ability to communicate in writing in particular. But now we're at a stage where there are extra steps that we have to take. In addition to just simply putting text on page or on PowerPoint slide, you have to look at it. The opportunity is greater to go back and change things rather easily, but it's also the need to monitor the correctness of what it is you're trying to say, because getting us right to our topic today, there are exogenous factors that interfere and intervene with how we want to communicate. Call it autocorrect, call it anything you want. Autocorrect is an outside decision maker.
Yep.
It, 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 it isn't something you control, it's something that the system controls.
Yes.
And what the basis is, I'm not even going to get into technology. As I said earlier, anything that begins with an E or has technology
You're out.
associated with it is not something I want to deal with. But the intelligence behind it, while it is supposed to free us up, at the same time adds steps to what would or could be an automatic communication process. It's fascinating. What we had to do when it was longhand written is burdensome up to a point. What we do now using technology in order to write, to edit, to create, to do whatever, communicate, it also has the extra steps, not the same, but different ones. Right. And it gets us into this discussion on what is, the decalogue for preparedness, and the first one being the exogenous, and a sense of the exogenous. We live with it every day, despite the fact we don't even acknowledge it. It's the ordinary.
It's normalcy, but it's the idea of starting the Decalogue with exogenous was a nod to the fact that the majority of things that happen to us are just that. They happen to us, they happen around us, they're outside our influence. And that, it's a nod to the Stoic philosophers without adopting 100% of their ideology, but the fact that you and I are both we actually control very little of our own environment.
Yes.
And accepting that and understanding that is the first real step forward in the world of preparedness. You can call it, you can frame it for a lot of different things, but it's simply because we understand that the world around us is far more complex and far more challenging than we can control.
Yes.
And therefore, we're in a situation where things are going to happen that are going to cause us harm, difficulty, place us in positions of chaos and distress. And we will have done nothing to cause it, contributed to it, nor can we do anything to ameliorate or fix it.
Right.
It is just a state of it is what it is. And I think that's an important start point.
Yes. What's fascinating about all this is the more we live in and accept systems, the more we assume. That's always a problem. Assumptions always are problems because they lead us into a world of unawareness because we trust. Automatic trust is a problem, but it leads us into a sense of control. Well, I now can control the words I put on the page. Yes, you can. But as many people would say, if you like to do PowerPoint and you use the PowerPoint platform, you can add all kinds of things to it. You can remove all kinds of aspects to it. You can make it as glitzy and colorful as possible, but it's still a platform that you have to adhere to, period. You cannot suddenly do something different. And we think we're in control when in reality, that fiction of control is actually aided and abetted by the fact that we are embracing systems that seem to liberate us from certain burdens and therefore give us control. But that's a fiction. That's not reality.
It is. And we also have to understand that putting our words in a book in the 1800s meant our words had to be read in context of the book because that's the only place they were.
Exactly.
Now, when you put your words and your ideas, and this is from somebody, I put out dozens of pieces of material on social media every day. My words can be taken and used elsewhere. If somebody with 1 million followers on Instagram decides that and interprets what I said in their own lens and accuses me of something, it can all come crashing down around me when I've done nothing wrong but put out a set of words. So now we have the lens, or we should have the lens, that we have to examine our content that we put out to the world as how might others look at this? How might others interpret this? And how might that come flying back at me in a post from somebody with a far bigger audience than I do? That reality didn't exist pre-internet, pre-social media. And when I mean pre-social media, the iPhone was created in 2005, I think it was, or 6.
Yeah, something like that.
We're talking under 2 decades.
Yeah.
We now face the ability to have our work squandered and quashed because of an external interpretation, irrespective of whether it's accurate or not, of the words we present, which means now a lot of people are hesitant to place views in the open space.
Yes.
Because as we speak of exogenous, that's not, after I say it, it's like as a Boy Scout leader wearing my Leave No Trace t-shirt, because August is the month of safe water. So I figured this would be a perfect thing to wear today. Words are like toothpaste out of a tube. Once they're out, you can't put them back in.
Right.
And so online, it is even more true now that we are so open and susceptible to that kind of influence, which does lead to the second one,
which is responsibility.
Yes.
Okay. But it just sticking to the exogenous reality, the fact that we live in exogenous contexts is a radical change from say people of a certain age grew up in, where your whole pathway for career and education and so on and so forth was a control mechanism. You got this kind of an education in order to get that kind of a career. And this is not to say they were guarantees, but there were pointers. There were with assumptions that went with it. And so when we talk about, say, the book versus the online, we've moved from the power of words and the meaning of words. Once they're there on a page, in a book, they're there. All right. Now we live in a world of interpretation.
Mm-hmm.
What we see on the screen is open to a matter of opinion, interpretation, context, out of context, use, multi-use. We could go through a whole range of that kind of a approach to, let us call it, the written word. The written word is not the message anymore, going back to Marshall McLuhan. It's the medium. It's sitting there. I'm looking at a screen on my other screen here, and I'm going, well, if I wanted to change all that, I could change all that.
Yep.
That's me changing my words, or me stealing words out of a Google search, right? Without acknowledging that this comes from Google or whatever. And what part of this is good? What part of it is bad? I think it's, personally, I'd like to be non-judgmental. I think there's value, but it's one in which the exogenous has become more real than the endogenous.
Yeah.
In the endogenous being the internal, they're all variables, no two ways about it. But a series of endogenous variables in a system or a model means one part of the model influences the other, but it's an internal relationship. But once you get exogenous, all the variables just come at you from everywhere. And if you're the creator of an idea, let's assume, got to be careful about that. We can get into a deep philosophical discussion on where ideas come from, but I don't want to do that.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah.
That in itself is an interesting issue. But then you get the fact that you're exposed. I mean, this actually is what the existential phenomenology approach to understandings, the hermeneutical problem. The hermeneutical problem is everything is interpretation.
Yeah.
There is no such thing. Even a definition, even a dictionary definition of a word is an applied definition that has context.
Well, exactly. And that gets, I mean, we could go down another whole rabbit hole of defending language and defending factual interpretations.
Right.
I think that's a separate avenue altogether, because we do, but there are some things that should not be up for interpretation. There are some things that it is what it is, and your and my opinion of it is quite irrelevant.
Yes. I fully agree.
But no, we're culturally, we're moving past that barrier.
Yes.
And I don't think that's helpful to the greater society.
No.
Without miring myself in anything specific there. But if we go on to the second item in the Decalogue, when we talk about responsibility, when we in the frame of the exogenous world that we just talked about, understand that there is a personal responsibility about your life. Just simply in general, even if we park the preparedness idea to a side, there's a personal responsibility to your life. If you want to eat, it is your responsibility to figure out how to procure nourishment. Potable water, housing. It's not, people call ideas that you have certain rights in the world that can't be violated. Well, there's a great saying that said, it's not a right if it requires the labor of another person.
Oh.
Right? Is one way that I look at it. But the
Mhm.
idea being is you have a responsibility to provide for your own basic needs.
Yeah. Yeah.
And that is the second part, because you exist within a world you have very little control over. What you do have control over through responsibility is
Yes.
what you do
Yeah.
and what you
Yeah.
say.
Yeah. Yeah. Yeah.
And
Yeah.
that's an exceptionally important part in
Yeah.
life in general
Yeah.
for everybody.
Yeah.
But when we speak in the preparedness spectrum,
Yes.
it sets the condition for everything else that follows,
Yeah.
that I am responsible.
Yeah.
Now, that doesn't mean me on my own, and we'll
No.
get
No. 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 No.
there's
No.
rationale later for that, but
Yeah.
it means that I am responsible to find my avenue, to
Yeah.
find my methodology, to take
Yes.
care of myself and for those who I'm responsible.
Yes. You know, it's almost ironic that the freer we think we are in terms of our capability to handle and understand and whatever, because of technology, be it AI or whatever is dreamed of for the future. And people worry about, well, I'm going to lose my job. What we actually have to look at more seriously is our responsibilities increase exponentially with all of the in face of all the things we no longer have to handle on a regular basis. It's not about losing your job. It's about being more responsible for your life, the life of people around you, your social commitments, your ability to comply, your willingness, you know, and so on and so forth. Your survival mechanisms, there's something that I was looking at recently, call it that, doing a little analysis around acceptance. There's something called radical acceptance, and there are three principles around radical acceptance. Radical means all the way, complete and total. So it's not half-assed.
Yeah, it's all in.
It's all in or not at all. You can't be responsible for this little tiny thing without recognizing this little tiny thing is part of a much bigger reality. I don't want to use the word system because then it becomes, an ideational thing. The other principle is accepting in your mind, your heart, and your body. Right? That's radical acceptance. It isn't just, my head saying I agree. It's it's my heart saying I'm committed. It's my body saying I will do what needs to be done. Now we've opened a huge door for responsibility. It isn't just I'm going to accept, I don't know, the impact. No, I'm going to accept the process that led to the decision that drove my values to look at the world in this way. Okay, well, in the ethics module that I used to deliver, responsibility had three dimensions to it. It's, you're responsible for what you bring to the table, you're responsible for how you handle what's on the table, and you're responsible for the consequences of your decision once you make it. So, and that's the big part. The worst part for us as humans, often enough, is the impact responsibility, the consequences. There are more people who will deny that they are responsible for the ripple effect that led to the tsunami that knocked over the entire village. When you look at them, you go, actually, no, you were the cause. Maybe it isn't the cause. You are the responsible. Because cause effect is not about responsibility. It's bigger than that.
Oh, yeah. Tort law has done it to us as well in society. Our advancement of tort laws, where a government can't apologize for something until the negotiations for a settlement are done. So when people say the government has to apologize for their actions, actually based upon the tort law system that we've set up, parties have to wait until all of the legal parameters are complete,
right.
Which is why when you're a public communications professional for Dow Chemicals or some other company, BP Oil, let's use BP Oil in the Gulf of Mexico. They could not apologize for what happened because until at such time as every single last legal claim against them was solved. Because as soon as they publicly apologize for something, that will be interpreted as I am responsible, I am at fault.
Yes.
Now, they will say things along the line, I am really sorry that this happened to you.
Yes.
And the damage is consequential, impactful, and needs to be made. People need to be made whole. And they'll say all of the right phraseology, but
Mhm.
part of responsibility is just that is we don't teach people that it is just to stand in front of their peers and say, I did this. This is why I did it. And because it didn't turn out the way I wanted to, I accept
Yeah.
responsibility
Yeah.
for
Yeah.
those consequences, right?
Yeah. Yeah.
It's, and this is part of embedded in the word responsibility and preparedness is you're going to be responsible to make a set of decisions
Mhm.
and they're not all going to work out.
No.
And when they don't work out, it is your fault. And that's perfectly okay.
Yes.
We're humans. We're designed
Yeah.
to fail.
Yeah.
We don't learn
Yeah.
unless we fail.
Yeah.
If we continually
Yeah.
succeed, we learn nothing. When we fail, we learn.
Yeah.
When we have in my old career in the Army, we would call it taking a knee. When you have to take a knee and you fail and you don't cut it, you drop out of a course,
Yeah.
you get injured, whatever it may be, it's a learning opportunity.
Yep. Yep.
Responsibility is in a situation, I made a call. I had a rationale for making the call. It didn't work out, or it did work out. Imagine if you were successful. That I am also responsible.
Yeah. Exactly. Exactly.
And that's another thing we say. We steer away from standing up and saying, I made this decision. It turned out to be the right one. And I'm very successful because of that. We have a cultural problem where we look at that as arrogance.
Yes. Yes.
And we can't
Yes.
celebrating your
Yes.
successes in the face of other people's normal lives is seen as arrogant and improper. But
Yeah.
I would argue on a completely different tangent that we need to be doing more of that, of celebrating individual
Yeah.
successes.
Yeah.
Well,
Yeah.
and it doesn't matter that others are not at this time
Yes.
receiving, earning the or working through the same level of success. But
Yeah.
that kind of jumps into the third idea
Yeah.
of belief.
Yes.
I live in an exogenous world that is largely beyond my control. I know I have to take responsibility for my decisions and the outcomes of those, but I also must believe in my own ability to be successful.
Yes.
Believe in my own ability to navigate disruptive and dangerous and impactful and challenging and chaotic situations. And I believe in my ability to be able to make sound and intelligent and informed decisions.
Yeah.
You
Yeah.
have to have that personal
Yeah.
belief.
Yeah.
And
Yeah.
it's
Yeah.
not
Yeah.
grounded in an education
No.
or an
No.
age,
No. No.
etc. It's just a personal inherent belief that you have the ability to make intelligent decisions.
They're interesting. That's this whole belief thing. Often enough, uh, given our cultural, multicultural, there are all kinds of cultures that do that adhere to this approach to belief. It's always an externalized belief. It's always a system of belief, whether it's religious or patriotism or what have you. One's religious belief or one's national patriotic belief actually starts with you. It doesn't start out there.
Yeah.
Right. That's just the context in which you exercise your belief. And people don't realize that. So people don't necessarily see that there's an internalized source of belief, which starts with self-value. We're taught to be humble, right? To use allude to a phrase you use. But for me, humility actually is a misunderstood dimension or even value, if you want to use that term. Humility for me is looking in the mirror and accepting the reality that you see. Um, People who are humble are not necessarily subservient. People who are humble have a very strong understanding of who they are, what their values are. It's to me a dimension of self-confidence. Strongest aspect of belief, it resides in self-confidence. Do you have the self-confidence to live your values to the point where it manifests itself, or they manifest themselves in actions that you are accepting responsibility for? Actions including decisions. I mean, there's the whole spectrum of what we're talking about. And I just find it fascinating where in MBA programs they talk about imposter syndrome, usually aimed at the C level. How did I get here? What am I supposed to do? I don't know anything. I think imposter syndrome is almost a universal that most of us, an everyday way, um, have.
Mhm.
We don't believe that we are capable of doing the right thing, but we do have a strong sense of being afraid of doing the wrong thing. That's
Yes.
part of our education system
Yeah.
as well. So we reinforce the negativism, which leads to a sense of our imposter syndrome, which is our sense of incapable of doing anything. Whereas if we actually had a belief system built on our values, we would first and foremost understand that we all have intrinsic values. We all have a value to contribute. We all, and I don't mean production. I mean just the fact that we're alive. There's value there, and we have intelligence, and it has nothing to do with education. It has to do with making decisions, being responsible for what drives those decisions, values, being responsible for making the decision in context at the time when it's needed, and then accepting responsibility for, well, what did I do? Um, and if you don't believe in yourself, then often enough, none of that matters. None
And
of that
belief,
works.
none of that works. And belief is so important in the advancement of human condition and human society because belief is tied to innovation. Our society advances because we're innovative, right? STEM disciplines, everything that you and I enjoy, and we're talking about before with an E in front of it, is all because somebody was innovative.
Yes.
Because somebody believed they could come up with a better way
Yep.
to address a problem in society or to simplify a difficult process that we were all facing.
Yes.
Innovation, right?
Yep.
And this is why, and we're rolling here, this is why innovation is tied to the next item in the Decalogue, which is vision. If you don't have belief in yourself, belief in your ability to make intelligent decisions, you can't ground the future in a vision.
Yeah.
Right? There are two ways to approach the life that we're provided and given, and that is one of laying out a roadmap in some form of vision and attempting to be innovative and chase something we're after, or to be reactive and just exist, which unfortunately a good number of people in this world choose that avenue to exist and then just deal with the world as it happens around them, to them in an exogenous sense. So the idea of vision being the fourth part of the Decalogue is just that. When you're looking at preparedness and when you're looking at greater life, you're looking at big existential questions. Why am I here?
Yeah. Yeah.
But I focus more on the included question of, so what am I going to do?
Exactly.
You
Yes.
know, I'm 53. I intend to be here for a lot longer. What am I going to do with those years? Am I going to sit around and wait for stuff, shall we say, to happen around me? Or do I have a strategy, an idea, a plan? No guarantees I'll be successful. Absolutely not. But I know what I'm trying to go and accomplish. And this is for my personal life, for my health, for my relationships, for everything else. It's about having a vision or being capable and believing,
Mhm.
having a vision
Yeah.
for
Yeah.
what you're here and trying to achieve.
Yes. We often enough get caught in concretizing certain words like vision, especially in a business context, is a thing. This is what we aim for. This is what we need to do. And then we're going to go there, put the processes in place, and then we're going to monitor the KPIs on how we get there, so on and so forth. It's a concrete and, for me, fairly reductionistic approach to vision. For me, vision isn't, and I've seen this in some psychology research. Often enough, vision motivates us to live out of a future. And if you think about the exogenous reality, there is no such thing as future. There's only now. Future is as much a fiction as anything else. Past is also something that no longer exists. While we may be out of the past or results of, or the consequence of the past, whether it's decisions, personal or otherwise, nonetheless, it's no longer here. So it almost becomes that, in the moment approach to things is that's where we find reality. What I find fascinating about this notion of vision is that it's misunderstood as a plan. It's that difference that I sometimes talk about as the difference between a strategy and a plan. Strategic planning is an oxymoron, right? Planning is what you do. Strategy is how you think.
Yeah. Yeah.
It's much bigger. It's how you think and how you make decisions. It's the how. A plan is the what.
Mm-hmm.
And so when I think of personal vision, I don't think in terms of the future. I'm way older than you are, and I'm not sure if I have much longer. So it's not about time. It's definitely not about time. It's about what am I capable of doing?
Yeah.
That's a very here and now question.
Yes.
That to me is vision.
Yes.
What not could, it's what are my capacities? What am I capable of?
Yeah.
And so it puts it back into a responsibility context. Because what I'm capable of is part and parcel of what I believe I'm capable of doing. So it's a belief, but it's also a responsibility, because my capacity or capability to do something is based on my ability to be responsible in not only doing it and achieving it or moving forward on it, but also accepting what the consequences are, whether they're positive or negative. So that whole notion of vision, and I love it. When I was looking at these 10, that notion of vision, I said, well, I hope we're not looking at this panacea day when everything is going to be perfect and we're never going to have problems. And I thought, no, that can't be Jeff. Jeff wouldn't do that to me.
No.
And if he did, I'd probably just in public in this video shoot him down anyway. But
well, and that's the beauty of using singular words.
Yes.
And in our back and forth discussions outside of this podcast, it was, I don't believe these should have a thou shalt in front of it. These aren't commandments. These are words that express. So when you talk about vision, it's not only that you are capable, but your personal acknowledgement that you are capable.
Yes.
Right? It's a personal reflective exercise in saying, not only do I believe that I have the capacity to make decisions and that I can influence the outcomes that are around me, but I'm capable of a whole bunch of really cool things that could possibly take me in different directions.
Yes. Yes.
Right? It's like, I have the belief I could be a great painter. I also know that I don't have the capacity to, I could learn the skill set, but that it would be far different than what my internal skill sets exist. But that vision, and the next one that I put in here is start back to kind of full circle back to the original one of exogenous, is risk.
Oh, yes.
We live in a world that is full of risk in all aspects, in all parts of our life, not necessarily discussing specific to preparedness, but we can't live in a place that's risk-free
No.
in any parts of our
No.
lives, whether that be
No.
relationships, employment, health,
Yep.
welfare.
Exactly.
You cannot live risk-free,
No.
which is why it follows belief and vision in the Decalogue, because with the belief, you now understand, A, that I live amongst risk,
Mm-hmm.
but B, that belief extends to my ability to make decisions
Yes.
within a frame of risk.
Yes.
And I have a responsibility
Yep.
when we just zero into the preparedness world to understand
Mm-hmm.
the risk
Yes.
that I expose myself to. And I live in a democratic country, so do you. We are free to move to live where we want to within this country. Not everybody in the world is that. I get it. But for the vast majority of people that will listen to this podcast, they have the freedom of movement. So
Right.
by choosing Toronto and choosing Ottawa, you and I have by default accepted a set of risks
Yes.
that each other may not have because of the location that we
Yep.
have.
Yep.
The risk in choosing the type of housing. You and I live in two different types of housing. Those come with their own inherent risks.
Mm-hmm.
Profession, every choice that you make in the world adds or limits
Yep.
or mitigates the risk that you are exposed to. Understanding that risk from the perspective of acknowledging and making an informed decision is the point of putting risk in this list. Not to say it is our responsibility to go out there and hammer away and mitigate risk to a nominal perspective in life, because that means, living in your bunker in the basement.
Yes.
That's not life, right? That's not belief. That's not vision. That's not life, but it is acknowledging risk.
But even in the example of bunkering, I don't even think that's a word, but that's neither here nor there.
Bunkering in the bunker.
Yeah. You may have mitigated certain risks, but you haven't recognized there are other risks.
Yeah. Yep.
To eliminate the social context of risk and to reduce it to, say, you and your family in a bunker means you damn well better get along together as a family. And I don't know about you, but I know more family experiences where people prefer not to be in the same room together.
Yeah.
And for real reasons. This is not to accuse anybody of anything. Nope. Parents are parents, children are children. Mm-hmm. Children grow up, they become adults. They're no longer dependents, whatever the tax laws say. And growing up is growing independent. To lock yourself in an almost hermetically sealed location in order to protect yourself biologically does not take into account the psychological, social dimensions of risk. This is more than just, staying alive. This could lead to all kinds of things. And if you have weapons, I would hate to think who's going to shoot whom first.
You're absolutely right. And it gets back to the responsibility. And there are risks that are added because of decisions you make. By mitigating one risk, you may actually inversely increase another risk. And just accepting that risk is an inherent part of our life. But I want to make the point that risk is not bad.
Oh, no.
Risk in of itself is not a bad thing in life.
No. Yes.
Right. I'm on my own entrepreneurial venture I'm taking a bunch of risk, but that's great risk,
Mhm.
right? Because there's a potential for a significant return on investment reward. So I have to take risk to
Mhm.
do that,
Mhm.
right? If I wanted to, I could just get your standard 9 to 5 job, et cetera, and do that and mitigate risk. But that would then take on another risk because somebody could fire me
Yes.
and take it all away in a day. So there's a different part of risk. And I think it's important to understand that risk, it is what it is.
Well,
It is neither good nor bad.
yeah. Once again, we have this super negative understanding of reality. Um, um, Risk is always bad. Okay, risk is challenging. All right, now I'm trying to get out of a bad, always bad mentality. Risk is, no one's going to say that it's easy. There's a misunderstanding that we need to get move towards ease and comfort. Getting old is an uncontrollable risk,
Yep.
and it has all kinds of things associated with it that you can laugh about or cry about. Your choice whether you laugh or cry. I mean, when an older person, this is through experience, gets out of bed in the morning, you have to start thinking about whether your knees are going to work or not, or how they're going to work.
Yeah.
I mean, no two ways about it. Oh yes, and I see all the vids on Instagram. It'll go out and exercise. After the age of 80, you can do isometrics and all this other stuff. Excuse me, I don't do anything that intentionally makes me sweat. I'm sitting here in front of a fan that's trying to mitigate the humidity, at least blow it somewhere else as we're talking. But when we think of it about risk, uh, there's so many dimensions to risk. The risk of failure, that's the obvious one. You're going to get the answer wrong. You're not going to get 100 in your exam, and you're not going to get an A in the course. Okay, so there's the everyday risk that we grew up with, right? There's the risk of disobedience. Parents are going to not allow you to do certain things. Okay, fine, fine. The other is the risk of success. This is something we don't necessarily understand as a risk.
No.
Achievement, success, we consider that the elimination of risk, when in reality, it's a growing of risk. Your risks, the risks associated with success actually increase exponentially because your responsibility increases exponentially. Okay, there's you can't get away from that. While we can talk about risk as inherent in everyday existence or everyday life, yes, it is. But every moment that we achieve something, every time you win the race, you know, you've actually set yourself up for failure with the next race.
Yeah.
And I was what I would call the emotional coach for a really good friend of mine, nephew, Dan, who was a triathlon racer and actually got on Canada's triathlon team. And when Dan started, he didn't start at the age of 12. He started at the age of 20 something. He already graduated from university and he said, I'm going to do this. Okay, fine. And one of the things that he used to do when he first started was to hang back. So the swimming part, hang back. Because I would ask him, I said, where do you position yourself in terms of this, 150 people? Well, all the experts are in the front, and I'm, the winners from the past, and I'm a newbie. I go, okay, that's fine, but I want you to rethink that. You aren't running against them. The challenge is not beating them. The challenge is actually beating yourself.
Yep.
The more successful you are, the greater the risk is that you might become unsuccessful.
Yep.
You might actually fail. Now, talk about ironic.
I
you
don't.
know, and so when we think about risk, it isn't just, someone throwing rocks at us or shooting at us. It's the fact that we're in a position where someone can throw rocks at us or
Yes.
shoot at us. And that
Yep.
was a matter of combination of choice and compliance.
And risk brings some pretty exciting experiences. Like I've never been skydiving, but I have been flying across the top of a water at 70 miles an hour on a jet ski.
Okay.
Um, I've been in some other life experiences with the Army that are a level of exhilaration that is almost unmatched
Yeah, I can imagine.
in the world, but it comes with a massive amount of risk. But
Sure
if you
does.
don't accept that risk, you're
Sure.
not having the experience.
No.
And so
No.
this is part of the joy and the happiness that we often don't
It,
pursue
yep.
that I think is great. And that brings in the discussion of the next one in the Decalogue, which is capital. Capital is our tools that we have available to us within the world. Now, the
Mhm.
term capital traditionally has been associated with financial capital.
Yeah.
It's the money in the bank. It's the resources to start a company. But capital is human capital. It's our education. It's the
Yes.
knowledge, our social capital, relationships, trusted memberships that
Mhm.
we may have.
Mhm.
It's our physical capital, the goods that we may have access to.
Mhm.
All of these things exist in the world around us,
Mhm.
and they
Mhm.
are tools. The more we invest in capital,
Yep.
the greater set of tools that we have to
Yes.
use to meet our vision,
Yep.
to
Yep.
do whatever it is we're going to do. We have to view capitals as tools and not possessions.
Yep.
Often we look at capital as something that I own and I keep and it's mine. But I want to grow my social network of connections and trusted relationships because that is a tool,
Yep.
not a tool in the sense as and again, when I say tool, people may connotate that I'm using those relationships for my own good. No, I'm
No.
improving my human
Yep.
experience. I'm
Yes.
improving the human condition that
Yep.
I have by building these strong relationships. But what I'm inherently gaining is access to human capital. Like you said, your coach, your 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 ability to give somebody else guidance or feedback or
Yep.
coaching and be
Yep.
valued,
Yep.
this only because you had a strong social connection with that individual,
Yes.
right?
Uh,
I When I build financial capital, I need financial capital to be able to do things. Those things that I can do improve my human condition. It improves,
mhm.
etc. So capital is, if we view it as a tool, then
Yep.
it's part of something that we can access, share, and I think this is a part we don't think a lot about is transfer.
Yes.
Transfer capital to other people.
Yes. 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 It's fascinating because capital, when I looked at the list of capital, I said, oh, okay. I hope we mean more than what MBA programs teach us, which
Hmm.
is it's all about money and investments and things like buildings and so on and so forth. And tools, yes, resources, because just to expand it beyond the specifics of a hammer or whatever, however one understands a tool. There are resources that not only we need to contribute to, but we also need to depend on. We are not in this alone. I don't care what anybody says. When I say, vision for me is what am I capable of? Capital, tools, resources is how am I going to enable myself to realize my own vision? They're enablers,
Yeah.
right? This enables us to get things done. And there's the pragmatics, get things done. We have to not only make decisions, oh, I can make a decision about almost anything, but if I can't get off my rear end to make things happen, then what's the worth of the decision? It
Yep.
doesn't mean anything. It's that difference between it is that resource, whether it's And yes, there's that multiplicity of what a resource or a tool is. Without saying people are tools, they are resources that I can learn from.
Yes.
And I can also give license to. This is something that often enough we think we have to teach others or direct them or command them, when in reality, it's much bigger than that. And it's about modeling a behavior that gives others license to behave in a certain way. It's much bigger than just saying, you, Johnny, you better sit down and eat dinner. It's a case of, and I'm not going to, couch it in terms of, well, here's a way in which you can convince Johnny to sit down and eat dinner. I don't give a damn if Johnny doesn't eat dinner. It's not my problem, it's somebody else's problem. But what I am saying is the way we choose to behave is as much a capital resource for others as well as ourselves than anything else. And it gets us back to accepting risk, having a vision, believing in ourselves, and being responsible.
Exactly. And capital is, when I have a number of human relationships, I'm capable of solving a lot of big problems, but you and I together are capable of solving bigger problems.
Yes. Yes.
And it is shared social capital. It is sharing
It
our
is.
human capital.
Yes.
It is
Yes.
sharing our physical
Yes.
capital, and at times our financial capital
Definitely.
to achieve a greater project.
Yes.
Now, we can be altruistic and say greater good improve the human condition.
Yeah,
We
yeah.
can say capitalistic, we're going to pool our financial
Yeah,
resources
yeah.
to build something. But it's this idea, and this is why it's right before the next one and linked to it, is we live in a collective sense. We
Yeah.
live in a tribal sense.
Yes.
Now, I put tribe down there, and I had a number of other ideas, and I'm like, no, tribe is the right way
Oh yeah.
frame
Yeah. 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 Yeah.
to frame the human condition is that right as far back, and even I would argue when we were living in caves, the human animal requires a certain number of individuals to be present at the same time together, collectively working towards survival at that time for the large part, but whatever the common goal may be. And they shared the capital, right? The capital was shared, the food, the physical resources, the social support. It was all collectively together to support. We don't win in a lone wolf environment.
No.
And when I just speak of preparedness, there is a fairly loud but small movement within the preparedness community about being a lone wolf, going it your own.
Yep. Yep.
I'm going to bunker down, build my bunker,
Yep.
and you all the rest of you can go do what
Yep.
when the day comes. But
Yeah.
everything in human history, from anthropology and every ology that you can come up with, will tell us that humans have better outcomes
Yes.
when we do things collectively. And when we share the capital, then that grows those outcomes exponentially.
Yeah. What
And
what I
so
find, yeah, what I
tribal
find,
is important.
yeah. No, no, no. What I find fascinating about that approach is, and I do agree, is we still have this misconception of Darwinianism as the survival of the fittest, which is a single individual surviving. Look at me, I'm surviving. Well, it's a misunderstanding because you can't survive alone anyway. Give me a break. Well, not only do you have to develop in an evolutionary way certain characteristics that make you survive over against someone else or something else, you also have to procreate. You've got to pass it on. Well, wait a minute. We've
Every
suddenly gone
species
from,
does.
we've gone from just me to me and someone else.
Yeah.
And then me and someone else creating a someone else.
Yeah.
That's a someone else. And you go, whoa, wait a minute, folks. Survival of the fittest is not, the wolf, the lone wolf approach. And anybody who knows anything about wolves, and I live in the city, I don't know about wolves, but I do like some. I have some very interesting, Instagram connections. Um, the lone wolf is an outlier. The lone wolf is dangerous. The lone wolf isn't something. Uh, Wolves are monogamous. They live in collectives. Call them tribes. Call them whatever you want. Packs. I don't care what word you use. They hunt together. They don't hunt alone. The lone wolf hunts alone, and they are actually, despite the werewolf world that we live in and the misconceptions of what a wolf can do, they're not necessarily out there to kill everything and anything that crosses their path. There's a whole, I'm going to use a human term for it. There's a whole decision process that is a collective decision about eating. All right. Okay. They're driven by the need to eat, and look at the word, they are driven by the need to eat, not alone. It's in a pack. It's a
Yes.
tribe.
Yes.
Right.
And if you can even
Wolves,
take that wolf analogy a little bit further and say that the wolves will procreate at a rate co- coordinated to the level of resources available.
exactly. Any animal will. Any animal group will. And those who look at the lone wolf as a model have failed to realize how destructive the lone wolf is, not only to people and others around them, but to themselves.
Yeah.
The lifespan of a lone wolf is incredibly limited. Right? So you want to lone wolf it. You want to get away from the crowd and not the crowd, the tribe. You want to go off the grid, right? Good for you. You get what they call the Darwin Award.
Yeah.
And that is not a positive.
You and your yurt and your solar panel. I wish you the best of luck in the woods of northern Ontario. It's just, and in the word of preparedness, when we talk about tribes, we're talking about collections of people with a similar viewpoint. And we do that in community organizations that we belong to. We do that in political organizations we belong to. We live amongst cultures that we generally agree with and get along with, et cetera. And so preparedness is no different, right? You want to make sure that if you're considering adopting preparedness as a frame, that you surround yourself by people who think the way you do. It's
Yeah.
like they say, if you're an entrepreneur,
Yes.
you need to surround yourself by people who are doing the same thing you are.
Yes.
And ideally people who are more successful than you are. You don't want to surround yourself with people who are not participating in the same journey you're on.
Just the example that you gave, you're living in your yurt with your solar panel and so on and so forth in northern Ontario, growing your own food and whatever the hell else you're doing. Just that description alone, if you think about it, the lone wolf is a lie because it fails to recognize the need for connectivity at the most base level. Right? Where did your solar panels come from? Where did the material for your yurt come from? Unless you have yaks that you have, taken the hair of and, mined the hair. And self-survival, yeah, I fully understand it, but guess who actually survives in the Berber or whatever world? It's the tribe.
It's the tribe because the blacksmith doesn't go hungry.
Exactly. And I think about the people who have to go out and live in their alone existence in order to be survivalists. Good for you. I'm happy for you. But don't misunderstand that you're actually alone. You're not.
No.
You have to get to where you are in your aloneness. You have a whole range of connections, a whole network that got you there.
Yep.
Okay. Unless you're completely off the social context and grid where you are, I don't even know how you begin to raise your own food. I mean, where did the seeds come from? Maybe you're not, I don't know. To me, it boggles my mind in that people actually think that they can be totally isolated and survive.
I'll give you. I've been an outdoorsman for 40 years, and I consider myself to have a pretty solid, robust set of skills. I give myself a 50-50 shot to make it 30 days on my own. And that's because that's just the harsh reality of
Yeah.
the human animal extricated from
Yeah.
the modern
Yep.
society and
Yep.
dropped into the wilderness, right? Oh, I may do better if I can bring all of these tools
Yeah.
and things that I have
Exactly.
from the
Yes.
modern society or even old tools. If I
Yeah.
can
Yeah.
bring all of this capital with me, that
Exactly.
will exponentially increase the probability that I survive longer, not permanently, but survive longer. And this
Yeah.
is
Yeah.
why here in the Decalogue, this is the point where I make the transition from at the edge of understanding tribal. You've now reached, from my perspective, the basics of preparedness. Now, when we step it off, we talk about strategy.
Yes.
Now, this talks about how you and I define strategic thinking,
Yes. Yes.
orientation,
Yes.
right? Understanding all of these things from exogenous to responsibility, belief, vision, risk, capital, and existing in a tribe.
Yes.
Now we're at, as the Army officer used to ask, what's the so what? Now
Yes.
that we understand all of this, what's the so what?
Yeah.
What
Yeah.
is your strategy? Not the plan.
No. No.
I could
That's
care less about the plan,
yeah.
but your strategy.
Yeah.
What are you after? What are your ideas? What are the
Yes.
future
Yes.
potentials?
Yeah.
What goal are you going to go after
Yeah.
in this existence,
Yeah.
embracing the previous 7 things that we've talked about?
Yeah.
What is strategy? And this is why it's so important, because I use the wandering duck analogy, right? The duck just swimming around really looks like it's doing nothing. Its legs are going 100 miles an hour under the
Yeah.
water. Its body is just looks like it's aimlessly wandering around. Or are you zero focused, orientated on something? What when you make that switch to strategy and embracing strategy, that's where you really start to make a difference in your in taking control, for lack of a better term.
Yeah. It's the duck analogy is fascinating. We have this cliche of getting your ducks in a row. That's planning. That's not
Yeah.
strategy.
No.
It's planning. Oh, and when I do a presentation, I facilitate a session, and I may have used this said this before. I pace for about 20 minutes before the opening day. Actually, I pace for about 20 minutes before the opening session of each day if it's more than one day. And my joke to myself is getting all the butterflies facing in the same direction. Now, what does that mean? First of all, there are butterflies. I am not eliminating the butterflies. They are there. They're part of the risk factor. Am I going to fall down and make an ass of myself? Potentially, yes. Am I going to do whatever I can in order to prevent that? Yes, I would hope so. Have I prepared what I need to, what I think can be said, should be said, might be said? Yes, I busted my ass to get to this point. Doesn't eliminate the butterflies. All right. And the butterflies all need to face the same direction. Right. And I have to climb the wall for 20 minutes to allow that to happen. I didn't talk to my butterflies.
Nope.
I didn't direct them. I didn't tell them what to do. Right. But the strategy is I'm going to give you an opportunity to turn around, rearrange yourselves, put yourselves in order. And it's like something I learned about a scrum in especially Aussie rugby, or Aussie so-called non-rules footy. There's no such thing as non-rules. A scrum, preparation for a scrum is so orchestrated that it shocked me. I didn't realize it. So that um, phalanx that they create before they go charging somebody, which is the pyramid, basically lying flat,
Yep.
pyramid lying flat. The numbers on the back of the individual as part of the scrum is based on what contribution they're going to make to the game.
Mm-hmm.
It's a position number. It's a talent number. So that phalanx is a strategy that is executed by positioning people by number based on talent to where they need to be in order to win the game. And I go, that Jeff, that absolutely blew me away.
Yeah.
Because we have this impression that no rules means you just go in and you make total asses of yourselves.
Yeah, just figure it out as you go.
Just figure it out, jump in there, deal with the chaos. I'm not saying there's no chaos, but I am saying it's orchestrated chaos.
Yeah. Yeah. Yeah.
And the minute you ascribe to orchestrated chaos, you are not dealing with the orchestration. That's the plan. You already have a strategic thought in mind.
Yes. And when I consider
strategically,
when I think strategically, I do so in my business, I do so in my life, I do so in almost everything. And when you think strategically and you embrace the previous one about capitals being a tool, you now realize how useful and employable capital is in a strategy.
Exactly.
Now, even if my strategy is I'm trying to increase my own knowledge base, and I'm always doing that in different areas, I'm trying to learn new things. Capital makes that so much easier. Understanding that I might not have the capital, but I probably know somebody who does.
Yeah. 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 Go ahead.
And I was just going to say that ties it together when you're with the strategy in I'm responsible.
Yes.
I'm responsible
yes.
for not only creating a strategy, but I'm responsible for executing strategy.
Yes. So, if we were to go link some of these, again, using the analogy of team sports, which is so ironic considering I never played on team sports, never played sports, period, but that's my own worldview. When you think about the fact that you're going to create a phalanx and you're going to use your team is your tribe.
Yep.
That's number one. You're going to create, your strategy is to create a phalanx, which is the power structure that you're going to use in order to win the game. Your capital are all your people who have the talent and are identified by number what their position is going to be. Right? The risk is somebody being injured, somebody not being capable of living up to their talent, somebody that I depend on or trust who isn't capable might be in the learning process. The vision is to win. The belief is we're going to win because we have all these great people. Responsibility is each individual is responsible for their position and their capability. Yep. And you just go, okay, that's preparedness. What's the exogenous? Those SOBs that are facing us or we're facing, whether they do Haka or not, that's a pretty scary group.
Yeah. The All Blacks.
They're all, the All Blacks are not necessarily nice.
No, not on that playing field.
No.
Outside, sure.
Oh, yeah. Well, you want to go for a drink? That's fine. But on that playing field, we all know what we're here for. We all know what needs to be done. This is a collective approach to decisions, actions, and outcomes.
And if we take that collective team idea and look at the rugby idea, then it ties to the ninth deck of the Decalogue, which is persistence.
Yes.
Look at the Canadian women's rugby team in the Olympics winning silver. Absolutely shocking. I don't know how many number of teams on the global scale. It's persistence. It is a group of individuals in a tribal sense with a common belief and a vision, a
Yep.
strategy, but
Yep.
understanding that success is not overnight. Success does not happen.
Yep.
It happens in a series of, it's like a sine wave. Life, successes, failures, successes, and failures, but persistence is why you win the day.
Yes.
And this is almost, other than sheer chance, anything that you and I can influence as a human is more successful with persistence.
Yes.
Like the lottery is not because it's completely by random chance, right?
Yep.
We're not going to win the lottery by playing more.
No. No.
But persistence,
yes.
at anything that we're after as part of our strategy,
Yeah.
it's not a strategy if it's not persistently
Yeah.
pursued.
Yes.
I'm
Yes.
going to try to win Saturday, and if I don't win, I'm going to quit the sport.
Yes.
That's obviously not persistence.
No.
How
No.
many people have just finished fourth at the Olympics, which is arguably the worst position to finish in, with no medal, just a quarter of a second outside, and have now already thinking about their strategy to redesign the next 4 years of training
Exactly.
so that they're going to persist and break through that barrier.
Exactly.
There is so much value. And I fought with the word persistence versus consistent. And I think consistent is part of persistence. And I think persistence is a better word, that we have to persevere, which is included because we live in an exogenous experience, which means irrespective of your strategy, the world is going to continually punch you upside the head in whatever field or life that you're working through. And persistence is the key.
I agree with you. For me, persistence is a mindset. It's a commitment. It's a willingness. Consistence is a sameness, repetition.
Yeah.
And you need consistency to repeat, especially from again, we're talking about especially athletes, but not just athletes.
Nope.
You need to be consistent within your own value system. And when you've got to understand your values. You've got to know that this is actually what drives your actions and sustains your responsibility. If you aren't consistent within that responsibility, action, strategy, context, which is also a belief system, then you have emotional problems. You have mental issues. Often enough, sadly, it leads to escape.
Yeah.
The only way you're going to be self-confident is by being persistent in embracing your own capabilities, your own values, yourself.
Yes.
And that leads to the tribal side of this, is that not only are you going to model behavior, but I'm going to use a term that I use all the time, you're also going to lead. You're going to lead others by your behavior, not by your position of command.
No, lead by example. This is one of the basic premise of military leadership.
Yeah. Well, definitely. Yeah.
Or another one is the standard you walk by is the standard you accept.
Yes. Yes, well, that always struck me because my early dealings or workings with people in Canadian Armed Forces, or Canadian military, Canadian Forces at the time, since they keep changing their their name.
We're armed. We're not armed. We're
Yeah,
armed.
we're
We're
not.
not
We are.
armed.
We're not. Whatever. Okay. The I learned a lot. This is something that people who come out of my context or similar context that I have, they don't come out of my context, but a context similar to mine, would not necessarily be open to. And that is learning from somebody who is not you.
Yeah.
Who is not your context. You got to remember, I'm an academic. I'm like, so I'm sitting in my office at home right now, and I've got a library of almost 2,000 books. I mean, this is my personal library. This is an egghead. That's who I am. I'm an egghead. How do I enjoy myself? How do I relax? I'll read, Sein und Zeit by Heidegger. Okay, being in time. Existential philosophy. And you go, you're nuts. And I am.
Yes.
No, I fully admit I'm nuts. Nuts in the sense of not like any other normal human being, right? But at the same time, the more learning I have had, the more experiences I have had, the more open I am for learning from others. And that's what I find exciting. And I learned a lot from military people over decades. And it was just fascinating. One of the things I learned was, in particular, when you have your newly minted officer, lieutenant or otherwise, you always counsel your officer, your new officer, to listen to his 2IC, his or her 2IC. That's the chief warrant officer who's got the smarts, who knows the people, who has the experience. Take guidance from that person. Yes, you have the senior position in rank. No, you have the non-position in experience. Learn the difference. Learn the difference.
Yep.
There's a whole model for persistence. Learn the difference from what you know, from what you're capable of, from what you need to learn along the way.
And we do that. And we say I'm retired now 5 years, but you never leave the military. We do that because we exist in a tribal sense. We exist in a team sense.
Yeah.
Army is a team sport.
Yes.
Fighting on the grounds of combat is a team sport.
Yep.
We need our capital, and our capital comes from the human experience, not just the physical capability of the soldiers on the ground, but the human capital, the knowledge and experience. So the young officer who is in charge of 30 men and women executing a task on the battle space is successful when they do that. And so what do you create when you do that? And this is the summation of this list is the 10th part of the Decalogue is what you create. It is a byproduct, and that is resilience. Now, resilience across the spectrum within my academic world has a flurry of definitions. There are many different camps as to how to define resilience, what it is, how to contribute to it, how to build it, lose it, etc. But the general sense is that I can't build resilience directly. I build resilience through my other actions by increasing my capital, increasing my tribe, by having strategy, by being persistent, by having a belief. I create resilience. My resilience, by scientific definition, is my ability to absorb shock and my ability to return to a state of normalcy as quickly as possible after that shock.
Yes.
So our resilience through all of these adopting a prepared life and following all of these ideas and words, we create a state of increased resilience.
Yes.
Which means to the exogenous world, it's the counter to the first one.
Yes.
You build resilience, you become more resilient, you become less susceptible to the impacts of the exogenous world.
Yes. Yes. And two dimensions, and then we'll probably come to an end for today. two dimensions to that is, first of all, it's acknowledging that you can't control. That's what the whole exogenous issue and experience is. There are things you can't control. That's
Yeah.
it, period. That's number one. And I don't give a damn who you accuse or point fingers at. You can't control the weather. You can't control the frickin' traffic. Move on. You
Yeah.
can't control getting old. What are you going to do? Scream about getting old? Too bad. So sad.
You're still
Suck
getting
it
old.
up. Suck it up. The other is a strong dimension of resilience, which encompasses all of those other issues that we just talked about, the other 9, if you will, is the ability to bounce back.
Yep.
You need all those other things in order to bounce back, and
Yep.
that's what makes you resilient.
Yes. Your ability to, as Mike Tyson would say, get punched in the face.
Well, that's a way to end.
Yep. Yep.
Okay. Great talk as always. Have a good weekend.
All right. You too.
All right.